The morning sun filtered through the expansive glass walls of Lexington Prestige Motors, bouncing off the chrome finishes and pearl paint jobs of a dozen exotic vehicles. Rolls-Royces, Lamborghinis, Bentleys, and McLarens were displayed like museum pieces across the marble showroom floor. Soft jazz played over the ceiling speakers, setting a tone of elegance and exclusivity. This was a place where wealth didn't speak, it whispered. Vanessa Dalton, the floor manager, adjusted her navy blazer as she did every morning at 9 o'clock sharp. Her blonde hair was pinned perfectly, her heels clicked assertively with each step, and her sharp eyes scanned the showroom like a hawk. She thrived in this environment, where appearance was everything and profiling potential buyers had become an instinct honed over years in luxury sales. She spotted her regulars, affluent men in tailored suits, tech entrepreneurs on phones worth more than some cars, trophy wives draped in designer accessories. Her staff knew to approach based on shoes, watches, confidence, and attitude. It was an unspoken code. And then he walked in. The man looked completely out of place. He wore a gray hoodie, slightly faded, with matching sweatpants and plain black sneakers that had clearly seen better days. His beard was trimmed, his skin smooth, and he walked with quiet confidence, but his wardrobe spoke none of the luxury language Vanessa had trained her staff to read. Vanessa took one look at him and whispered into her walkie-talkie, "Security, eyes on the guy who just walked in. Gray hoodie." She put on her customer service smile, the kind with no warmth, and strutted toward him, heels clacking like warning shots across the polished floor. "Hi there," she began, crossing her arms subtly. "Can I help you with something?" The man offered a polite smile. "I'm just looking around for now. Thanks." She didn't move. "These vehicles start at $200,000. We don't allow unsupervised browsing, especially around the collector models." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that your policy or just your assumption?" Her lips thinned into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "It's our policy with certain visitors. If you're serious about purchasing, I'd be happy to get you a brochure. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We have actual clients to assist." He paused, giving her a long, steady look. Calm, not angry, just disappointed. Then he shifted his gaze to the Rolls-Royce Phantom beside him, admiring the gleaming hood ornament, the spirit of ecstasy. "This model's from last year," he said casually. "You haven't updated inventory since the spring. Still using the V12. But I heard they're going electric soon." Vanessa blinked. She didn't expect that. Still, she doubled down. "Sir, I'm asking you politely. This isn't a rental lot." By now, 2 uniformed security guards had made their way across the showroom, flanking the man like he was a potential threat instead of a potential client. Other customers had begun to notice. A few whispered. One even filmed. "Is there a problem here?" one of the guards asked Vanessa. She nodded toward the man. "He refuses to leave, won't give his name. Clearly doesn't belong here." The man turned slightly to the guard and said calmly, "I didn't realize admiring a car was a crime." "It's not," the guard replied, slightly uneasy now, "but we do reserve the right to refuse service." The man took a slow breath and looked once more at the car in front of him. "Interesting. I remember when this brand represented class and dignity. Shame." He looked Vanessa in the eye. "You might want to hold off on judgments. People have a funny way of surprising you." With that, he turned around and walked out, not escorted, not dragged, just walked out, head high, expression unreadable. The doors closed behind him with a gentle whoosh, and the moment he was gone, Vanessa exhaled sharply and muttered, "Unbelievable." Outside, the man stepped onto the sidewalk, pulled out his phone, and made a call. "Hey, Jordan," he said into the receiver. "It's me. I just visited the dealership." "Yeah, it went about how I expected." A pause. "No, don't worry. I'm still going through with the acquisition." In fact, he glanced back through the dealership's tinted windows, where Vanessa had already returned to her duties. "I think it's going to be more educational than I thought." He ended the call, slipped the phone back into his hoodie pocket, and walked off toward a black Mercedes Maybach waiting around the corner, its driver already stepping out to open the door for him. Inside the dealership, things returned to normal. Vanessa had already forgotten about the man. To her, he was just another person who didn't fit, another name she didn't ask, another face she didn't remember. What she didn't know was that the man she had dismissed so confidently was Elijah Carter, the quiet millionaire tech investor who had just closed the deal to buy out Lexington Prestige Motors, including the land it sat on. He didn't dress the part. He didn't need to. And in just 3 days, he would walk through those same doors, not as a broke window shopper, but as the new owner of the dealership she thought she ruled. 3 days passed. Vanessa Dalton strutted through the dealership as if she owned the place, and in many ways, she acted like she did. She had closed more deals than any other manager, and her name carried weight in the high-end luxury sales world. She was proud of her intuition, often bragging to new employees about how she could smell a real buyer from a mile away. It was a typical Thursday morning. The smell of fresh leather and polish lingered in the air. The floor team was buzzing, preparing for what Vanessa had been told was a special visit from corporate and executive inspection. Rumors swirled about a potential buyout or leadership change, but no one had details. Vanessa wasn't worried. She'd survived 3 general managers and 2 regional VPs. She was untouchable. As she finished a cappuccino at her desk, she noticed a group of customers walk in, dressed to the nines. One was wearing a Rolex Skydweller. Another had a custom Louis Vuitton briefcase. They were exactly her type. But then he walked in. The man in the gray hoodie. Vanessa's eyes narrowed instantly. Same face, same calm demeanor. Except this time, he wasn't alone. A younger assistant trailed behind him, holding a tablet and taking notes. 2 well-dressed individuals flanked him like business partners. And strangely, he was met with handshakes and respectful nods from 2 staff members who didn't know better. Vanessa's lips curled into a disbelieving smirk. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered, standing up. Without hesitation, she crossed the showroom. "You again?" she said sharply, cutting in front of him. "Look, I thought we made this clear the other day. This isn't some public mall for loitering." The assistant stopped typing. The 2 individuals beside him exchanged surprised looks. But the man remained calm, just like before. "I'm here for a meeting," he said, still polite. "With who?" "The janitor," she snapped, raising her voice. Heads began to turn. A few staff members froze mid-conversation. Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to make it more personal. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I've worked too hard to let some random guy off the street mess up my floor. You have no appointment, no status, and no reason to be here. So, do us all a favor," she pointed toward the exit, "and get out." The man didn't flinch. He simply tilted his head slightly and asked, "Is that really how you speak to potential clients?" Vanessa laughed, loud and harsh. "Clients don't walk in here dressed like they just rolled out of bed. You want a test drive, a Bentley? Show a bank statement. Otherwise, you're wasting time." By now, several customers and staff had taken notice. Whispers began circling. Some watched uncomfortably. Others took out their phones. One employee, Marcus, a new junior salesman, hesitated before walking over. "Vanessa," he said, cautiously, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "I believe I don't care who he says he is," she snapped, not taking her eyes off the man. "He can leave before I call security again." The man took a deep breath, eyes calm. He looked around at the stunned employees, at the customers who watched in awkward silence. And then he spoke, not loudly, but with enough weight to carry through the room. "Vanessa," he said, using her name for the first time, "do you remember asking for my name the last time I came here?" She blinked, caught off guard. "No," she said, "because I didn't need to." "Exactly," he said quietly. "You never asked. You assumed. You profiled. You decided who I was based on my shoes." Silence. "And yet here I am again. Not because I enjoy being disrespected, but because I believe in watching how people behave when they think no one is watching." Now everyone was watching. Then, as if on cue, the front doors opened. In walked a sharply dressed man in a dark suit with a briefcase and name badge. The regional vice president. Behind him, a representative from corporate. They walked directly to the man in the hoodie. "Mr. Carter," the VP said enthusiastically, shaking his hand. We're honored to finalize everything in person. Vanessa's heart stopped. Mr. Carter? The man turned toward her. I believe you met Vanessa already, he said flatly. The VP looked confused. Oh, I assumed you came in quietly through the executive lot. No, Carter said, glancing at her coldly. I wanted to see what kind of culture I was inheriting. Then he faced her directly. 3 days ago, you judged me without asking a single question. You embarrassed me in front of strangers. And today, you doubled down in public. Not once did you think to listen. Just assume and act superior. Vanessa's voice cracked as she tried to speak. I didn't know. No one told me. That's the point, Carter interrupted. You didn't bother to find out. You didn't need to know. Because you thought you already knew everything you needed to. The regional VP turned to Vanessa, face tight. We'll discuss your position after the meeting, he said bluntly. For now, please step away. She did, humiliated, trembling, her face red with shame. As Mr. Carter continued into the conference room for the ownership transition meeting, the rest of the staff buzzed in disbelief. Who was this man? And how did he go from being kicked out to owning the dealership? The dealership was quiet, not the usual hush of high-end professionalism, but a tense, awkward silence that hung in the air like smoke. Vanessa was gone. Security had escorted her discreetly through the back exit just minutes after Mr. Carter, now revealed as Mr. Xavier Carter, the new owner, entered the conference room. No yelling, no argument, just a shell of the powerful, confident manager who had ruled the showroom floor for years. Inside the glass-walled conference room, Xavier sat at the head of the table. His assistant, Clarice, typed notes on her tablet. Regional VP Todd Mathers and the corporate legal advisor walked through the final documents. Outside, the sales team murmured quietly. Phones buzzed. No one wanted to admit it, but half of them were Googling Xavier's name. And when the first article popped up, everyone went still. Xavier Carter, tech visionary, buys $12 million chain of dealerships across state after IPO windfall from foster care to Fortune 500. Xavier Carter's rise from nothing to millionaire CEO Marcus, the new junior salesman who had tried to speak up earlier, stared at his screen in awe. He's the guy who started RYDR, he whispered. One of the senior salesmen blinked. Wait, the car-sharing app? Yeah, sold it last year for like $160 million. A quiet dam spread through the room. Meanwhile, in the conference room, Xavier reviewed the final paper. Everything looks good, he said. Let's finalize. Todd leaned forward. You sure you don't want to wait until next week for the formal media announcement? Xavier shook his head. No need. Today was my introduction to this team, and I saw everything I needed. He turned to Clarice. Send the employee roster to my office. I want notes on everyone's performance records. I'll review them personally. Clarice nodded. Got it. Then Xavier stood. Meeting adjourned. He didn't walk out the back. He exited through the showroom. Deliberately, his presence felt in every step. This time, no one ignored him. Staff stood upright. Some nodded respectfully. A few even applauded softly. He paused beside Marcus, the young employee who had tried to defend him earlier. Marcus, right? Yes, sir. I appreciate you trying to speak up earlier. That takes guts in a place like this. Marcus nodded, nervous but grateful. Thank you, sir. Xavier handed him a business card. I'm promoting you to assistant floor manager. Effective immediately. You'll report directly to me until the new general manager is hired. Marcus's mouth dropped. Are you serious? Very, Xavier said. This company needs leaders who recognize people, not their shoes. As he walked toward the front, Xavier noticed several customers still lingering. One, an older woman in pearls, smiled warmly at him. I saw what happened earlier, she said. That woman was a disgrace. Xavier smiled politely. Thank you. I believe in accountability. She extended a hand. Well, Mr. Carter, I've been thinking about upgrading my Mercedes, and now I know I'm in the right place. He grinned. Let's get you taken care of. Meanwhile, across town, Vanessa sat alone in her apartment, staring at her silent phone. Her inbox, once filled with offers, invites, and accolades, had gone dark. She had built her entire career on confidence, boldness, aggression, control. But today, it had all been shattered by a truth she hadn't prepared for. She had underestimated someone who owned the building she stood in. Worse than that, she had treated him like he didn't belong. Back at the dealership, Xavier returned to the office upstairs later that afternoon, where Clarice greeted him with a manila folder. These are the profiles you asked for: performance reviews, complaints, and HR records for the top 20 staff members. He flipped through them. Keep Marcus, he said quickly. Watch the others. I want monthly reports. Clarice hesitated. And Vanessa? He paused, then shook his head. She had 2 chances. She failed both times. I believe in second chances, not third. He tossed her file into a separate stack. Then he looked out the window, down at the lot of polished luxury vehicles, a reflection of everything people assumed he wasn't supposed to have. Xavier remembered being 16, getting thrown out of a dealership for trying to sit in a used Jaguar. He'd promised himself that day, one day, I'll come back, and no one will see it coming. Today, he had fulfilled that promise and more. By Friday morning, Lexington Prestige Motors was no longer just a luxury car dealership. It was a viral sensation. The security footage from 3 days earlier, the one showing Vanessa Dalton kicking out Xavier Carter in front of customers, had somehow leaked online. Someone in the showroom, likely one of the younger employees, had copied the internal recording and posted a short, 45-second clip to TikTok and YouTube with the caption, "Manager kicks out black man in hoodie. Turns out he's the new owner flushed face." In less than 24 hours, the clip had over 8.7 million views. Mobile phone social media reaction explodes on Twitter/X. The hashtags were trending. Hashtag Xavier Carter, hashtag hoodie deseo, hashtag respect over riches, hashtag dealership disgrace. The internet was outraged but not surprised. Comments flooded in. This is exactly what black people face every day. Doesn't matter how rich or educated we are, we're still seen as threats if we don't look the part. Vanessa is the face of what's wrong with corporate America. My guy got kicked out in a hoodie and came back in a Maybach like a silent assassin flex biceps fire. This is giving undercover boss, but with vengeance, loudly crying face, clapping hands. The clip even made it to morning talk shows, with commentators discussing racial bias, classism, and appearance-based discrimination in luxury spaces. Television news coverage follows CNN ran a headline: Black tech millionaire Xavier Carter buys dealership that profiled him. MSNBC featured a segment titled, "From Foster Care to Fortune, the Xavier Carter Story on Air." A former business professor praised him. What Carter demonstrated wasn't just leadership, it was discipline, character, and justice without spite. He didn't explode. He observed, and then he acted. That's how real power works. Automobile at the dealership back at Lexington Prestige, staff were now treating Xavier Carter like royalty. But he wasn't looking for praise, he was looking for change. That morning, he held a mandatory team meeting in the center of the showroom. The entire team, from sales associates to janitors, stood in a semicircle around him. Dressed in a crisp gray suit, no tie, Xavier stood with his hands clasped in front of him. Calm, direct, unshaken. "Let's address the obvious," he began. "Most of you have seen the video. Some of you were in it. And now the whole world is watching." The staff remained silent. "This isn't about one bad manager," he continued. "It's about a mindset. One that says people who don't look rich don't belong here. That a hoodie equals trouble. That you can measure someone's worth by their shoes or bank balance." He let the silence hang for a moment. "But let me be clear, that mindset ends today." A few staff members nodded. Others avoided eye contact. "This dealership is under new ownership. I'm not just here to make profits. I'm here to build a culture, one based on service, respect, and professionalism, no matter what a person looks like when they walk through those doors." He looked directly at one of the older salesmen, the one who had laughed behind Vanessa's back earlier. "If you can't get behind that, I'll personally show you the exit, with dignity, not with arrogance." You could hear a pin drop. Then Xavier pulled out his phone. "I've already spoken to the PR team. We're launching a new campaign next week, driven by respect. We're highlighting customers who've been overlooked, misjudged, or underestimated. And we're using this dealership as ground zero. He smiled slightly. We're going to turn this scandal into a story of transformation, not for the headlines, but for ourselves. One brave employee clapped, then another. Soon the whole room followed. But Xavier wasn't finished. Receipt Vanessa's public apology that same afternoon, a video surfaced from Vanessa Dalton, who had remained silent since her termination. Sitting on a couch, no makeup, no suit, just a worn sweater and a solemn expression, she looked directly into the camera. I want to start by saying I'm sorry, not just to Mr. Carter, but to anyone who has ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. Her voice cracked slightly. I was wrong. I let stereotypes guide my judgment. I assumed. I dismissed. I humiliated someone who had every right to be there, someone who, as it turns out, had earned more than any of us. She paused, then added, I lost my job. Rightfully so. But more importantly, I lost the image I had of myself as someone who was just doing her job. Reactions to the apology were mixed. Some called it genuine. Others said it was damage control. Xavier didn't comment publicly. He didn't need to. He believed in accountability and growth. But he also believed that real change didn't start with apologies, it started with actions. Chart increasing a new era begins within a week. Sales at Lexington Prestige were up 27%. Customers, particularly from underrepresented communities, started visiting not just to buy cars, but to be seen, heard, and treated fairly. Xavier launched a training program for all staff called Check Your Lens, a mandatory course on unconscious bias customer-first service and cultural humility. He also partnered with a local nonprofit to hire and train foster youth for positions in sales and service departments, a nod to his own beginnings. By the end of the month, Xavier Carter's story had become more than a viral headline. It had become a blueprint, not for revenge, but for restoration. A month had passed since the video of Vanessa Dalton went viral, and since Xavier Carter revealed himself as the unexpected new owner of Lexington Prestige Motors. To the public, the scandal had faded. The outrage, the applause, the think pieces, all had slowly given way to the next trending controversy. But inside the dealership, real change was happening. And that change wasn't for show. It was by design. Counterclockwise arrows button A transformed culture. Every morning at 8:45 a.m. sharp, employees gathered for a team huddle in the center of the showroom. It wasn't mandatory anymore, it was voluntary. And yet everyone showed up. Gone were the fake smiles and stiff suits designed to impress wealthy clients. In their place was something more powerful, a shared understanding that every person who walked through the glass doors deserved respect, regardless of what they wore, drove, or looked like. Xavier Carter wasn't just leading from the top, he was on the floor, walking with sales associates, sitting in on service calls, and greeting first-time customers like family. One day, he even helped an elderly woman carry her walker into the lounge. She had taken 3 buses just to ask about a used car she saw on the website. No one treated her like she was wasting their time. Instead, the staff offered her tea, answered her questions, and thanked her for choosing them. When she left in her newly financed Mercedes 2 days later, she said something that stuck with everyone. I've never felt this welcomed in a place like this. Not once in my life. Books Investing in the Future, Xavier didn't stop at culture. He launched an internal scholarship fund, the Dignity Drive, for employees or their children to attend school, trade programs, or business courses. It was funded directly from his own profit shares. He also partnered with local high schools and community colleges, offering internships and mentorships, specifically targeting students from underrepresented neighborhoods who had never stepped foot in a place like Lexington Prestige. To Xavier, these weren't charity efforts. They were corrections, necessary steps to counter decades of exclusion masked behind luxury branding. We can't pretend luxury is neutral, he told his staff. It's been gated for a long time. We're here to tear down the gate and leave the doors open. Bust in silhouette, what happened to Vanessa? Vanessa Dalton never returned to the dealership, not physically and not publicly. Her apology video made its rounds, but her name had become synonymous with a cautionary tale. Don't assume. Don't profile. Don't forget who you're speaking to. She disappeared from the luxury sales industry and, according to quiet whispers online, took a position at a mid-level auto parts distributor in another state. Less pay, less power, more humility. Some people cheered her downfall. Others argued she'd been canceled. But Xavier never spoke negatively about her in interviews, not once. When asked by a journalist whether he forgave her, he said, "Forgiveness isn't mine to withhold. She made a mistake, a public one." And the world responded, "What she does next is up to her, not me." Chart increasing legacy in motion, the Driven by Respect campaign launched across 5 dealerships Xavier acquired, each one following the same Reformation playbook. Remove toxic leadership, retrain staff in empathy and cultural awareness, focus on people over profit, and somehow the profits still grew. People began traveling from out of state just to buy from Lexington Prestige. Not because the cars were cheaper, they weren't, but because customers felt safe, welcomed, and seen. And the hoodie? Xavier had it framed in his office. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Next to it, a small plaque read, "Don't judge the driver by the clothes they wear." XC Man Medium Skin Tone Briefcase Final Reflections on the 6-month anniversary of the ownership transfer. Xavier stood in front of his staff again, this time not as a new owner, but as a mentor. He wore a hoodie that day, a plain gray one, like the first time he stepped into the dealership. "I wore this hoodie the day Vanessa told me I didn't belong," he said. A few chuckles rippled through the team, not mocking, but amazed at how far things had come. "I wasn't angry," he continued, "not because I wasn't hurt, but because I've seen worse. I've had doors slammed in my face, schools that didn't want me, and people cross the street just because I looked like this." He tugged gently at the fabric. "But I knew who I was, and I knew that people's perception of me said more about them than it ever did about me." He paused, looking around the room. "So, if someone walks through those doors today, wearing the same hoodie, what are you going to see?" One of the younger employees raised a hand. Someone who might own the building. Everyone laughed, but it was laughter built on truth. Because the lesson had lasted, and Xavier Carter hadn't just changed a dealership, he'd changed lives. The end.